becoming still obviously allows us to then be able to gain a higher level of consciousness and, as some say, kind of a link to the divine. There's this beautiful saying by one of my favorite one of my favorite poets, Rumi: "I grow silent, dear soul, you speak." And it is, I know for myself, there have been so many times where I've been in meditation, and the most profound one for me came, in my early years of meditating. I remember just, they call it in spirit inspiration. I had this thought during meditation which really, it changed the trajectory of my life. And initially I was just like, oh yeah, that's just kind of a thought that I had, and I then went and did what I had thought about, the inspiration that I'd gotten. And I realized later that no, that was coming because I was connected. How do you feel like that's changed your life, and what things have you learned from being in that silent state?
Yeah, it's such a powerful thing to get into that science, because a lot of people think of it as an emptiness or a very undynamic space, but it's actually an incredibly dynamic space when you
Mm,
access that field. And I love the quote from Oprah Winfrey that she says, only from, she does these deeper transcending
yeah.
meditations. She says, it's only from that space can you create your best work and your best life. And that's because, and the analogy I like to use is this. So, if you think of a phone has an iOS, say an iPhone has an iOS operating system,
Yeah.
and it's got limitations and it needs to be upgraded, and it has glitches and things in that operating system, and that operating system is programmed by an operator, by a programmer, I should say, and that's like the software of our mind. It's like the subconscious mind and the conscious mind is a deeply programmed tendency and pattern of neurological pathways. But if you take that phone and use the analogy of that phone, it also has access to a field of infinite, almost infinite intelligence, which
Mm.
is the web. And the web is all around the phone. The web's not in the phone, the web's all around the phone. And so we have access to that field of wisdom and creative potential and innate potential that's all around us. It's in the field. And everything that's been cognized and created came out of that field. And so, what meditation does, and that's why Oprah said that, is because it allows us to transcend the limited framework of our conditioned mind, the program mind, and access the field of mind, which is the vast array of infinite creative possibility. And then we get these cognitions during our meditation. And this is why meditation can be quite a dynamic experience, is that we'll get into stillness, but then that stillness will be um, get it'll be filled with impulses of creative intelligence that will come through, that we're like, wow, where did that idea come from? A film, a book, a podcast,
Yeah.
and so we start getting these impulses of creative intelligence that start coming through from the field into the new software.
Have you found that you've had something that's come through that has changed your life?
I mean, daily, daily. I've written 7 books in the last 7 years. I've produced a feature documentary, run retreats, and all of that was cognized out of the field to, that's a good idea, that's a good idea, that's a good idea.
Mm.
And then we also lose the barrier of why would I do that, which is the self-talk and the
Yeah.
self-doubt. So not only do you access this incredible impulse of creative intelligence, so for me, it was all of those things that I've created in those many years. Um, to also not have the impediment of self doubt saying, don't do that. It's just like, hell yeah. And so you just go and do it.
And obviously, the power of the mind is a huge thing, and meditation helps that in a big way. You change the way you think, you change your life. How have you found that meditation has helped you on that path?
Just by, gosh, so many ways. It's hard to succinctly capture that in a short way. It's allowed me to realize a greater potential within me. And so by simply getting out of finance and becoming a teacher and running retreats and coaching clients and making films and writing books and getting impulses and getting inspired and realizing my potential to have a greater impact on the world and be hopefully a better person and be kinder and more caring. And I think the other thing that really meditation plays a big part in is that when we start transcending the seeming separation between us and the world around us, because that's an individual form, which is an emotional, mental, and physiological form that is perceived as me. And when we transcend in meditation, we transcend those three forms or vehicles that are perceived to be me, and we access the field of oneness, the field of in science called unified fields.
Mm.
And from there, when we start to normalize and stabilize that in our waking experience in the vehicle and in the three forms, what happens is we start to innately feel a sense of interconnectivity, not just with spirit, our own spirit, but with other people and other things, other forms. And so we start to realize that everything is actually an extension of me. And that really changes the way you start to interact in the world. You, by default, and I'm not 100% there, but by default, you start becoming much kinder and more caring and more
Mm.
compassionate and more understanding and empathetic about other people and other animals and other plants and other planets and solar systems, and realize that it's not just about me and my own individual form and how can I extract something to make my individual form have a better experience in life. It's like, how can we elevate the mass, the whole, because the whole is me. And so we naturally, by default, we see this time and time again with longer term meditators, move more into the direction of um, my task here is to elevate the whole,
Yeah.
because that's elevating me, which is the whole.
Well, it is a funny thing, isn't it? Because I noticed with myself, and a lot of other people have obviously said this, and you just briefly spoke about it, that with meditation, it calms the mind in such a way that your everyday changes, your reactions are so different to, how they may previously have been. You kind of stop and think before you react. There's that time where, if someone says something and you get upset, but then you're like, no, actually, in your mind, you can see it a different way. There's that reaction, it might be to your kids, to whoever, it really helps with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, most of us are operating with that iOS, that operating system, which is deeply coded. And a lot of us, all of us actually arrive into this world with some form of coding that came through from our parents.
Yeah.
So we're just arrived into the world, and we've got a software program that we're operating with, and then that gets even more coded as we go through life, particularly in our first 7 years. And then we start running with this automatic pilot that when we get into certain situations, there's an instantaneous reaction because it's a default sort of function in our mindset. But what meditation does, and I see this all the time with myself, it's like you said, there's like a little window where consciousness itself, rather than the mind, but consciousness itself that's watching the situation and watching you in the situation, says, how do you want to handle this? How do you want to react? What do you want to do here? And, I'm using it more and more in my day to day decision making. Which direction do I want to go in this moment? And you start having a greater capability to be very consciously aware with your actions, with your words, with the way you're living your life and the way you're engaging with people. And it really is quite empowering when we start to get that.
When did you decide, okay, I'm going to stop working in finance and then go and do all of the stuff that you do now? Because that would have obviously been quite a big leap, and you're obviously earning good money.
Yeah, it was really hard to walk away from, to be honest with you. It took me quite a long time once I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and then to the point where I actually ended up doing it,
Yeah.
because I was walking away from a very substantial and very stable income that, after 26 years, I'd become, a very well-established broker in my company and very well respected. And I could continue to work there for years on end till basically retirement if I wanted to, um, as long as the company sustained itself, which it still does to this day. And it was a very dynamic and successful company, and I got a lot of respect for it. But when I knew inherently that there was a greater purpose for me in the
Mm.
world, and I just couldn't sit there on the phone anymore talking to traders about the 10-year bond or the 3-year bond and a quarter point basis movement and a $10 million trade, it just, not to discredit those people that were working in those careers, because there's a lot of merit in it, and there was a lot of benefits in that, but it just became such a deep sense of knowingness that I had something else that I had to do. And then I had to go about finding a way to try and set up a commercially viable proposition for me to be able to do that, because leaving finance to start teaching meditation is going to be a tough thing when you've got a family to feed in eastern suburbs of Sydney.